In yesterday's video, we discovered and cleared Falls Church, a decaying ruin once a center of white-collar business, but by the time we arrived, a haven of super mutants. There, we stumbled upon a man named Paladin Haas who was searching for a lost initiate. After giving him our aid, we sent them on their way and moved towards the final building in Falls Church, L.O.B. Enterprises. L.O.B. Enterprises towers to the east. It's one of the first buildings we see upon entry from the Arlington Metro. It has an enormous, beautiful facade, still hanging after 200 years. The name of the company, L.O.B. Enterprises, is emblazoned in bright yellow upon a teal-green backdrop. A bold color choice that clearly came from the imagination of a person who lived in happier times. The building is so well preserved we can even read its pre-war address, 1852-7, Fairford. After looting the various minor containers outside, we can walk through the main doors, labeled with a big pink sign that reads, Entrance. Upon entry, we immediately get attacked by robots. Holy cannoli! Sentry bots on top of sentry bots! That's bizarre. Wait a minute, isn't this a corporate office park? What's a bunch of military-grade sentry bots doing in a corporate office? Are these the remains of its pre-war security? Well, I think it's clear why the super mutants haven't overrun this place by now. They're everywhere else in Falls Church, but not here. Now, we arrive in a lobby, and there are a few ways forward. A door to the south, a door to the north, and a stairway right behind the receptionist desk leading to an upper loft level. But first, we'll start by reading the L.O.B. Enterprises front desk terminal lying on the desk. L.O.B. Enterprises front desk. Welcome, Mrs. Waring. Please remember to always ask for ID and greet visitors with a smile. Here we find 4 notes. All personnel, emergency protocols, weapons policy number H31. As standard policy, all employees are required to carry low-grade military-class weaponry at all times. See HR policy number A12. In the event of a hostile takeover, your desk can be used as a makeshift barricade. Position the desk between yourself and the opponent, then crouch behind the desk while firing any weapon approved on Form B43-2. Note: cafeteria privileges will be suspended in the event of a hostile takeover. So I think they're using the phrase hostile takeover literally here. Usually when used in reference to a corporate setting, we're talking about a much larger, much richer company trying to buy your company out against your will. But in this case, I think they mean a takeover of the physical building by hostile forces. Hence the desk barricades. I'm amazed that they would equip their own employees with weapons instead of hiring a security force, for example. But then again, perhaps a security force would be too conspicuous. Maybe they're trying to lay low. But why on earth would L.O.B. Enterprises be raided and taken over? Also, the format of this note is clearly mimicking traditional beginning-of-flight airline alerts. In the event of a hostile takeover, your desk can be used as a barricade. In the event of an emergency landing, your seat can be used as a flotation device. And then at the very end, notice, cafeteria privileges will be suspended in the event of a hostile takeover. Sounds an awful lot like in-flight refreshments will be suspended in the event of turbulence. I just thought the two sounded remarkably similar. Anyway, in the next one, email, weapon practice tonight? From Derek McCoy to the entire company. If anyone would like to practice with their low-grade military-class company issue, Sam and I will be shooting rounds off in the yard at 7 p.m. Bring your own beer. Well, I love the cavalier way that pre-war Americans fired off weaponry in the parking lot of their place of business. This company really had a guns culture, didn't they? And the next one, sent item, man the doors. From Joanna Waring, the receptionist who sat at this terminal, to the entire company. Subject: oh no. They're here! Man the doors! The feds are here. The feds are here. So they were hiding something. But what? And the final one, to all personnel regarding caps and emails. from the Director of Human Resources to the entire company. I would like to remind everyone that, despite the impending federal invasion, standard company policy is still in effect. Specifically, do not write emails in all caps. This style is offensive to your coworkers. Thank you for your cooperation. I love that in the very moment of an invasion by the feds, the HR rep, of course, took the time to sit down at her computer and write a passive-aggressive email to the entire company regarding excessive use of caps in the subject line of emails, of course referencing Ms. Waring's previous email about manning the doors. Leave it to an HR rep, right? So the feds attacked. Perhaps this explains all of the military-grade robots we've found so far. Maybe these are not security robots at all. Maybe these were federal invasion robots, and they've been patrolling L.O.B. Enterprises ever since the invasion 200 years ago. I want to clear this entire first floor before moving upstairs, so first, let's head through the southern door to check out the bathrooms. Down a hallway, we see a men's and a women's bathroom. Checking out the ladies first, we find a big stack of boxes with randomized loot, a first aid kit by the sink, and the dismembered skeleton of a woman by a toilet. Nothing of note. Heading out and checking out the men's restroom, these bathrooms are very large, but I suppose that makes sense for such a large company. There's a cooking pot on top of one of the garbage cans. If you knock it over, inside, we find a buff-out concealed. And then aside from a pack of cigarettes and an empty bottle of whiskey by the toilets, there's nothing else in here. Heading out, we can bypass the front desk and go through the northern door. This leads to a hallway where we can go left or right. Turning right, we wrap around a hallway, which continues to our right, or we can turn left into a nearby office room. Here we can turn the radio off and start exploring some of these desks. We see that the second floor has completely caved in, filling the middle of this room with a whole bunch of rubble. We could go up there and explore, but I want to do things level by level, so let's hold off on that for now, and instead we can open the western door, which leads to a hallway. On the other side of this big rubble pile, we find a RoboBrain patrolling.
There you go.
The RoboBrain was going down a hallway, which leads to another hallway. This is already turning into a bit of a maze. Turning left, we can go west, which then turns south, which leads us back to the room we were just in. Okay, I have my bearings. We can go west to go into a new room. This leads to a storage room. Inside a pot, on the bottom of one of the shelves, we find a big stack of 10mm ammunition, and then a store of frag mines in one of the boxes. Opening a door to the west leads to another large office room. We see a Nuka-Cola Quantum glowing in the distance, and we hear a RoboBrain. And then a sentry bot.
That takes care of that.
Goodness, the feds weren't messing around, were they? What on earth was going on here? After looting the robots and the Nuka-Cola Quantum sitting on a bookshelf, we see a number of ways forward. There's a stairway going down to a basement level, but we'll tackle that in a minute. In one of the cubicles, we find another pot. This one had Jet inside. And on a desk, we find another terminal. But inside, all we see is the company-wide entremail that talks about standard company policy, having weapons on hand at all times. So instead, we can explore the adjacent room. To reach it, we go through a big hole in the wall. There are lots of filing cabinets to loot. We see gas pouring out of a hole in the floor. That basement must have some sort of leak. Have to be careful about discharging my energy weapons when I go down there. Here we find a desk with a pair of brass knuckles on top, and we get interrupted when a sentry bot comes down some stairs. Our exploration is alerting all of the federal robots on all floors. Well, at least this way we're clearing them up. After looting a Nuka-Cola machine in this hallway, we can return to the office room to finish looting. We find some Psycho lying in a refrigerator, some 5.56mm rounds lying next to a ham radio, and then a variety of other containers to loot. With this room clear, we can head west to that hallway, but instead of going upstairs, we'll explore the room right next to the stairwell. Here we find more office cubicles, and we begin to see some of the the arms that the employees left behind. We see a skeleton holding a laser pistol. This man likely killed by the federal robots as they raided the place. And there's a locked ammunition box by a filing cabinet in this cubicle. Some ammunition inside. And then that's it. The stairwell here is completely caved in. Now, instead of going up this stairway, there was another hallway we passed next to that very first room we found. So retracing our steps, we can bypass that first robo-brain we destroyed and go down a southern hallway. After looting a Nuka-Cola machine, we can open a door to the west, which leads to a stairway going down. Oh my gosh, there is so much to explore here. The end of the hallway leads to a T-junction. We see a door to the left, and to the right, that very first room we explored. Okay, now I know where I am. Turning back east, we can open a door to the left, which leads to a cafeteria room. And here we find a bunch of skeletons. And I believe this says a lot. We remember in the company-wide emails that in the event of a literal hostile takeover, the cafeteria and break rooms would be closed. And yet here we find a bunch of bodies with their weapons all laid out. Now, of course, it's impractical for the HR department or the managers to barricade the doors to the cafeteria while being invaded by the police, but setting that aside, I think we can divine from this that the federal raid happened very quickly. We've found skeletons still lying at their desks, and skeletons lying in this cafeteria. They were likely in this cafeteria before the robots invaded. They probably never even got the message from Miss Waring because they weren't at their terminals. So these poor people were taken completely by surprise, slaughtered while they ate, despite having their weapons with them. We find a refrigerator here, a first aid kit on the wall, and an Itotronic with some Mentats and sugar bombs inside. We can leave by opening a door to the east. This leads us to a new hallway, turning left and rounding the corner just to get my bearings. Okay, I think I know where I am. This one should lead, that's right, to the Nuka-Cola machine and the stairway to the basement. All right. So now all that remains is to explore the rooms to the east. There are two doors. The southeastern one leads to a big storage room. We can walk away with quite a lot of scrap, but of note we do find a copy of Pugilism Illustrated on the second level of one of these shelves in one of the middle rows. We can also loot some darts and a first aid kit. With the storage room explored, we can head out, turn right, and explore the northeastern door, which leads to an office. Here we find another L.O.B. Enterprises employee terminal. But again, all we find is the big company-wide email giving instructions on what to do during a hostile takeover. We can loot some boxes behind the desk, and then at the bottom of a middle shelving unit to the south, we see two big wooden boxes filled with pre-war money and a pot filled with Mentats. Right. I believe we've explored the entire first floor. We now have a number of options before us. There were two stairways leading down, one by this Nuka-Cola machine, then there was one where that sentry bot came up, and we found three ways upstairs. A stairway to the southwest where the sentry bot came down, the stairway behind the reception desk that we bypassed at the very beginning, and the rubble in the room where the second floor collapsed. Well, let's start by going up those stairs that were behind the reception desk that we passed at the very beginning. This leads us to a ledge overlooking the lobby, connected to a double door that goes down a hallway to a library or some sort of storage room to the right. We see a lot of bookcases covered in telephones and other supplies, but not much else. Opening the other door to this room, we can go back out to the hallway. We see two rooms opposite us, and the western path is blocked in with rubble. So these two doors are all that's up here. They lead to the same room. We find another employee cubicle area. To the southeast, there's a still functional employee terminal on one of the desks, with again all the same company-wide intramails. It's starting to get a little disappointing. You'd think some of them at least would have their own private emails or diary logs to read, and then we just find a little bit of random junk. So there's nothing really up here. That's one of three paths to the second floor explored. To explore the next one, we'll go to that big office space where the second floor crumbled down to form a rubble ramp leading up. Unsurprisingly, directly above that office space was another office space. Here we find another terminal, but this one is called L.O.B. Enterprises Sam Johnson's terminal. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. Please refrain from making inappropriate comments and actions towards the female employees. As is company policy, this reminder will remain on screen for as long as Human Resources deems necessary. Oh dear. On Mr. Johnson's terminal, we find all of the same company-wide intramails, but we do find two unique ones. The first, memo, sexual harassment charge. From the Director of Human Resources to Samuel Johnson. Mr. Johnson, I would like to remind you that company policy forbids any form of harassment between employees, sexual or otherwise. Specifically, you will refrain from greeting any female employee with the phrase, "Hey doll, want to see if this is a grenade in my pocket or if I'm just happy to see you." This statement is not only offensive and inappropriate, but could be considered a misuse of company-issued grenades. See Form B43. Gotta love how the HR person makes such a focus on the misuse of company property. The next unique memo on Mr. Johnson's terminal is Memo Responding to Federal Raids. Internal Memorandum. Due to the increased awareness of our upcoming project milestone, you and your fellow employees may be required to initiate emergency defensive procedures as outlined in the Employee Handbook. If required, please review policies number H31, L.O.4, L.O.5, P55, and T.O.1. Your continued adherence to company policy is appreciated. So they were expecting a federal raid, and they knew that the feds were becoming aware of whatever project they were working on. What were they working on, and why were the feds so interested in it? Now, this message about sexual harassment on the terminal is a vestige of some cut content. For some reason, Bethesda decided to cut a terminal that would have tied this sexual harassment piece together with a larger story. There was to be a terminal likely in this same cubicle area that belonged to Jeannie McAndrews. On that terminal, we would have learned that Miss McAndrews, a dedicated employee who's already shot 5 people for this company, is upset with the sexual advances of Mr. Johnson. She ends her terminal by saying, "If you expect us to get this project done, then stop Sam from talking about the grenade in his pocket, or I'm out of here along with the entire female staff." On her terminal, we also find an email where she responds to Derek McCoy. Remember, Derek sent a big company-wide email inviting everyone to go shooting with him. She responds saying, "Sure, I'll definitely be there. I wouldn't miss a chance to have my weapons accidentally discharge and hit that grenade in Sam's pocket." But for some reason, Bethesda cut this terminal, tying in all these little side stories together, which is a bit of a shame. At any rate, in this room we do find a skeleton lying next to a pulse grenade and a stack of frag grenades on top of a first aid kit. In the southeastern cubicle we find another terminal, but this one has no unique entries. To the southeast, on the other side of the room, we find another skeleton lying on the ground next to a 10mm pistol and a big box of ammunition. But that's it for this room, and we don't see any way out to explore the rest of the second floor. That leaves 3 paths remaining, the final staircase up and the 2 staircases to the bottom floor. Let's explore that one staircase leading down to the room filled with that gas that was leaking up into the top floor. Here we find another skeleton on the ground next to a laser rifle, a locked ammunition box with energy cells inside, some boxes with pre-war money, and a door leading to L.O.B. Enterprises archives. Immediately on the other side, we begin to hear the sound of military robots. The room is filled with a flammable gas, but what else can we do? Heading into the room, we see a staircase leading down with sentry bots coming up. And of course, once we attack, we ignite the gas in this room. After we recover, we can take out the sentry bots, who then get joined by 2 Mr. Gutsies. Heading west, we see some 10mm ammunition lying by a skeleton among some rubble, and then we get attacked from behind. Looks like this sentry bot was responsible for the many corpses we find here. We see an employee lying on the ground, leaning forward, clutching his belly, and then another skeleton still sitting at his desk. On the desk, we find a copy of Chinese Army Special Ops Training Manual. Chinese Army? There is a still functional terminal here, but it doesn't have any new entries. We see a door to the east, but it leads back to L.O.B. Enterprises. Well, I don't want to leave this place yet until I finish looting it, so turning around, we can explore the western side of this basement. We find lots of containers down here filled with all sorts of randomized loot. There are 2 ammo canisters in the middle of the northern wall. Next to these are 2 cabinets side by side, one of which is locked, both of which have weapons and ammunition inside. This room turns left. It's shaped in a big L. There are lots of filing cabinets to the east and southeast, which is a great opportunity for those of us with the Scrounger perk to walk away with some ammunition. And then finally going south down a hallway, we reach another sentry bot. This looks like another employee cafeteria or break room. There's an Itotronic on the eastern wall with some buff out inside. We can loot some Nuka-Cola from a Nuka-Cola machine to the north. And next to this is another skeleton lying on the ground before a blood pack beneath a first aid kit sitting atop a safe. After looting the food from the fridge, we can turn the corner east where we find the bathrooms. These are much smaller than the ones that were on the lobby level, more like little closets than anything else. And then the hallway goes south and then turns east into some sort of generator room, I think. Certainly some sort of utility room. Typically in rooms like these, we find buttons with floors that slide aside, revealing staircases leading deeper, but we don't see anything like that in here. All we find are a few minor containers, a first aid kit, and 2 lockers filled with a full suit of metal armor and some bottle caps. And with that, we finish exploring the archives. Really, the only thing interesting we found here was the Chinese book. Does that mean these L.O.B. Enterprise people were Chinese communists? Or maybe just this one employee? Now, I suppose they could have been doing research for the US military and they needed some Chinese manuals to do so, but then why would they get raided by the government? The door at the eastern end of the basement that we bypassed earlier leads to that one stairway that comes out to the hallway next to the Nuka-Cola machine. At last, I'm finishing my mental map of this labyrinth of an office building. This means we have only one final path before us, and that is to ascend the staircase on the far western side of the building where we got attacked by that sentry bot. At the very top of the staircase, we turn right to see, looks like some sort of executive elevator. This leads to the L.O.B. Enterprises East Wing. We find ourselves in a dimly lit hallway, and we hear the sound of more robots. It's likely that they heard us enter, and this time I'm going to clear the place of robots before we explore. This way I don't get interrupted while reading a terminal. Crawling down the hallway and peeking into each room, we finally spot a sentry bot prowling a ruin to the southwest. Checking the other rooms on this floor, we don't find any more enemies. At the end of this hallway, we see a doorway to the right leading to a blocked-up staircase. So instead, we can turn left, where we find a staircase leading to the next level. Again, going down the hallway, this time in the opposite direction, checking each room, we see that the hallway is blocked off at this end, with a hard-locked door to the right and an open door to the left. Inside, we find 2 more robots.
Where? What's the matter, huh? Dead.
With them destroyed, we can continue forward by going through an eastern door. Here we see a sentry bot at the far end of the room. We can take him out with our Gauss rifle. Continuing south, we find ourselves on the other end of this hallway that was blocked up by rubble, and we can go through a southern door to walk into that room that was locked with a very hard-locked door, where we find Sharon already at work taking out the federal robots in this executive suite. With the last of the robots destroyed, we can finally take a breather and explore this eastern wing in peace. It looks like these robots we just destroyed were responsible for killing the man slumped over in this green leather-bound chair. After looting an ammo box, some darts, and a first aid kit, we can then open up the CEO's desk. Inside, we find the L.O.B. Enterprises CEO key. Using the key, we can open up the big silver L.O.B. Enterprises secure case lying on the desktop. Here, we find the Zhu-Rong V418 Chinese pistol. What is the CEO of an American company doing with a Chinese pistol in a secure case on his desk? Perhaps the terminal will give us some information. In the first option, we find a saved invoice. Happy Liberty Imports, invoice HP4110C. Contents: 1 USA flag, 450 lead paperweights, and 1 flame retardant throw rug. Total $0. That's incredibly low, especially considering the inflation in the Fallout universe. Special instructions: do not leave with receptionist. Deliver directly to the CEO only. Well, if this is the invoice for what's in the case, clearly this is wrong. We didn't find a flag, we didn't find paperweights, and we didn't find a throw rug. Unless the CEO, having the key, removed all of these items and disposed of them. And the next one, company policies. We find all the same terminal entries we've already read, with 2 new ones. The first, inclement weather policy number C31. In the event of extreme winter, nuclear conditions, all employees are required to proceed to human resources and complete forms D87A, D87B, H041, and A143 Addendum 7. In accordance with company policy number L83, employees will be issued iodine tablets, personal Geiger counter, meal rations, and sworn into the sovereign L.O.B. Republic? The iodine tablets make sense. In the event of a nuclear disaster, this can help prevent them from getting thyroid cancer. The Geiger counter, meal rations, sure, but L.O.B. Republic? Could this have any relation to the People's Republic of China? We also find a new entry called Evacuation Policy T01. In the event of emergency evacuation scenario F1-A, all executive staff not under penalty are to be evacuated from the building via the archives and connected civic tunnels. All other personnel will remain behind to safeguard active projects, or projvects, misspelled here, from imminent federal inquiry. All employees are tasked with barricading the main doors and will be further tasked with keeping the building secured until 5 p.m., or until the Chief of Security enacts Protocol T81. The usual lunch break will be suspended for that day. Well, these poor employees, in the event of a federal raid, L.O.B. Enterprises had a contingency plan to evacuate the high-level executives through underground tunnels in the archives, and they were to use their own employees as meat shields to hold the feds at bay while the executives escaped. Strangely enough, we already explored the archives, and even though we did find a utility room or generator room that looked a little suspicious, we didn't find any switches or tunnels in that room. Perhaps they had all caved in. It's also interesting to note that we do find the CEO's body here, which means that despite this evacuation plan, the feds moved so quickly and struck with such surprise that even the CEO died sitting at his desk. On his desk, we find a copy of Tumblers Today, interesting reading material for a corporate CEO, and a box of grenades. Behind him is a locked cabinet filled with a laser rifle and more ammunition. He had a private bathroom. Inside we find a first aid kit, but more interestingly, he stashed a mini nuke at the top of a shelf. Because, just in case, right? Using the CEO's key that we got from his desk, we can unlock his door. This leads back out to the hallway where we entered. But next to his room is maybe his private secretary's room. Here we find another employee terminal with all the same standard employee intramels and an easy-locked gun case against the wall. Inside we find a Chinese assault rifle. More Chinese weapons, what the heck? Heading through a door to the east, we see that this portion of the second floor is mostly collapsed. We can loot some of the minor desks and cabinets. And to continue along, we have to walk along some pretty tricky ledges. We find a box filled with microfusion cells under one desk, and creeping along, we arrive at a staircase leading down. But to continue our sweep of this room, we creep around the perimeter until we arrive back at that one room where we destroyed the sentry bot and the Protectron. Here we find more containers, more ammunition, more weapons, a trunk that is suspiciously empty, but that's about it. Heading out, we find ourselves back in the hallway, and we can start to explore the rooms that we bypassed while clearing the eastern wing. To the north, we find an executive's room with even more weapons and ammo in the gun case behind the desk, and on the desk is a very hard-locked R&D operations terminal. We need a lockpick skill of 100 to unlock this bad boy. Inside, research and development, sole ownership, L.O.B. Enterprises. Violators punished under number P47. We see two sections. The first, lab reports. The first one, ZRIN 363. Experimental prototype makes extensive use of hardware common to liquid ammunition flame projection weapons. While initial test results were impressive, extreme weight of unit, 118.3 kilograms, and fume inhalation rendered most test subjects incapable of firing the unit or remaining conscious under typical field conditions. In the next one, number 375, prototype introduces proprietary ammunition type. Conventional 10mm shells house a caplet containing amalgamating agents. When the caplet was broken in lab tests, localized fireburst and shrapnel projection met requirements for project. However, in field tests, amalgam caplet ammunition proved too fragile, and several detonated from excessive vibration or walk speed. In the next one, number 401, prototype attempts to refine results of Acumist coating within weapon barrel. Initial tests showed promise. As predicted, delivery friction superheats projectile as it is delivered from the weapon, and conventional 10mm ammunition can be used. However, during live fire testing, subjects firing the weapon in rapid succession suffered severe burns to the fingers and palm. In the final one, number 418, prototype refines Acumist barrel experiments by addition of retardant jacketing, as well as internal heat diffusers. Rate of fire diminished from unmodified versions of weapon. Conventional 10mm ammunition does not fully liquefy until impact, giving the 418 exceptional accuracy compared to earlier prototypes. Live fire tests report no major casualties. We recommend ZRIN 418 as production candidate. At last, we have enough information to paint a picture of what went on here. Before the war, L.O.B. Enterprises was either an American company hired by the Chinese to research producing advanced Chinese weaponry, or was a Chinese company masquerading as an American company operating on American soil, but also researching advanced Chinese weaponry. Their initial goal was to produce a weapon that shot molten ammunition. It took a series of refinements to the prototype before they finally succeeded in a production candidate, the ZRIN 418. However, L.O.B. Enterprises caught the attention of the federal government, possibly by trying to communicate with their counterparts in China or by delivering and receiving goods to and from China. In anticipation of a raid from the feds, management here at L.O.B. Enterprises provided its employees with weapons, possibly smuggled from China, which is why we find so many Chinese pistols and assault rifles here. They encouraged employees to engage in target practice after work and trained them to stay put and to fight in their own office space, using their desks as barricades in the event of a federal raid. Meanwhile, they provided an escape plan for any executives working here, building passages that connected to the civic access tunnels beneath the archives section of this building, which sadly we don't find 200 years later. They apparently cared about their employees because in the event of a nuclear apocalypse, they would have provided them with iodine tablets to help prevent them getting cancer from the nuclear fallout, and they would have sworn each of them into the L.O.B. Republic, likely a branch of the People's Republic of China here on American soil. While they did all of the research here in America, possibly so that they could have access to American patents, they likely actually produced the prototypes in China. On October 23, 2077, the production company in China delivered the latest prototype here to L.O.B. Enterprises for additional testing using a Chinese delivery company masquerading as an American one called Happy Liberty Imports. To get through customs, they wrapped the weapon in a flame-retardant rug to prevent the incendiary rounds from catching fire, then shielded the weapon with over 400 lead paperweights to make it impossible for customs to x-ray the suitcase and discover what was inside. Then they wrapped all of the paperweights with an American flag to really seal the whole American patriot ruse. The courier was given instructions to bypass the front desk and deliver it directly to the CEO. But almost immediately after delivering the package, the United States government raids L.O.B. Enterprises. They invade the building with a swarm of sentry bots and Mr. Gutsies, opening fire, laying waste to absolutely everyone. Their arrival was so sudden that the receptionist only had time to write a brief message in all caps, warning everyone in the company that the feds were here, whereupon after sending the message, she was likely almost instantly killed. But few people in the company found the message. Most of them were having breakfast in the cafeteria room. We have to remember it was 9 in the morning when the bombs dropped on Saturday, and the government managed to sweep through the entire facility, killing everyone, even the CEO, before they had a chance to initiate any of the company's policies. But since the bombs dropped that very morning, there was no one from the government left alive to retrieve the invading robots, and so they patrolled L.O.B. Enterprises for 200 years until we arrived to destroy them. Due to the apocalypse, we also find the prototype weapon that this company created, the Zhu-Rong version 418 Chinese pistol, lying on the CEO's desk, never being used in actual combat. The pistol itself is an interesting weapon. Like all other Chinese pistols, it takes 10mm ammunition, but unlike other Chinese pistols, it has an additional incendiary effect, doing an additional 2 points of damage per second over 5 seconds. Due to the nature of the weapon, it has the longest range of any incendiary weapon in the game, aside from the heavy incinerator. Thanks to the incendiary effect, it does more damage per shot than a typical 10mm pistol, but it's much slower, which means we get fewer of these shots off. This means that the Zhu-Rong V418 actually has a lower DPS than just a standard Chinese pistol. The Chinese pistol has a DPS of 24, the Zhu-Rong 418 has a DPS of 20. So this may be a practical weapon to use for people with exceptionally good aim who need fewer shots to off their enemies, but for players who are relying to be able to spit lead at their enemies, this thing is so slow that it may not be useful. That said, it has a significantly higher durability than a typical Chinese pistol, making it a much more valuable weapon. It also has the distinction of being the only 10mm weapon in the game with an incendiary effect. As a side note, the weapon is likely named after the ancient Chinese fire god Zhu-Rong, also called Chongli. Now that we've retrieved the prize and uncovered the secret of L.O.B. Enterprises, we can loot the remaining rooms as we walk on out. There were 2 pre-war books on the desk of the R&D operations team, and then on the bottom floor we found a variety of containers with randomized loot, nothing terribly special, and 1 more employee terminal with all the same notes that we've already read. We see more evidence of the employees being caught completely by surprise, 2 skeletons lying on the ground next to a 10mm SMG, some ammunition, and an armor case, within which we find some recon armor and a recon helmet. We pass by a nook on the way to the elevator, where we find a teddy bear in a leather chair, we can save that for little Marie, and a security operations terminal. We find a section for the security officer to log in. Here the officer could view the security feed or bring the turrets back online. Then we find a saved memo. Attention, Security Captain. Mr. Humbert, I am informed that federal investigators are interrogating Mrs. Johansson in the main lobby. Please enact Security Protocol C688 as outlined in your Security Handbook, Addendum 4. I believe we are reading about an event here that happened long before they actually attacked L.O.B. Enterprises. Remember, the receptionist's name was Ms. Waring, not Johansson. So I think what happened is that the feds were interviewing some of the employees, like Mrs. Johansson, for days, weeks, or months leading up to their eventual raid. This may be how L.O.B. Enterprises initially got wind of the fact that the feds were onto them. Remember, in many of these terminals, HR would frequently say that they knew a raid from the feds was likely imminent. With that, we can leave L.O.B. Enterprises with the confidence that we've explored every nook and cranny and uncovered every secret. L.O.B. Enterprises is more evidence to the extent China was engaged in espionage here on American soil. We've discovered 2 companies that have been infiltrated, Mama Dolce's and now L.O.B. Enterprises, and this is just in one city. Where else could the Chinese have infiltrated? Did they ever have a stronger presence on American soil? Is it possible that 200 years after the apocalypse, there is some place in America that is a thriving Chinese city where Chinese is spoken and where the Republic lives strong in defiance of American democracy? If so, it would take another Fallout game before we could ever explore it. What are your thoughts on L.O.B. Enterprises? And more broadly, on China's activities here on American soil? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week on a wide range of topics spanning all of the games. If you want to make sure that you don't miss my next video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. You can follow me on Facebook to keep up to date with all Oxhorn related news. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.